You awaken, not with the comfort of a warm bed or the gentle light of morning, but with a start on a rough, unyielding surface that does little to cushion the weight of your aching body. The air around you is dense and unfamiliar, tinged with the scent of smoke, damp stone, and the unmistakable trace of human presence left unchecked by modern sanitation. The sounds filtering in through the cracked wooden shutters are chaotic. Hooves against stone, the shout of a vendor already deep into his pitch, the bark of a dog too lean to be anyone's pet. And then it dawns on you. You are in Rome. Not the postcard version, not the cinematic fantasy where every citizen strolls through marbled forums, discussing philosophy while olive-skinned children laugh beneath aqueducts. No, you are in the Rome that breathes and sweats and grumbles. The Rome that history books often edit, polishing its glory and forgetting the grime. You rise, disoriented, stepping out into a street so narrow it feels more like an alley, hemmed in on both sides by buildings that lean toward one another like conspirators. Above you, laundry flaps from windows strung with frayed rope, and the voice of a woman screaming about spoiled garum echoes off crumbling plaster. A cart lurches past you, its driver barely glancing in your direction, as its wheels fling a splash of unknown liquid across your tunic. The street stinks of rot, urine, and desperation, and though the sun has only just begun its slow climb above the rooftops, the city is already wide awake and already annoyed. Marble statues loom at intervals along the road, their faces expressionless, their togas eternally crisp. They represent gods and emperors, men who never touched a chamber pot or stood in line for water. You feel their gaze, and for a moment you expect comfort or awe. Instead, you feel small, unimportant, and somewhat unwelcome. These figures do not offer guidance. They remind you that the Rome you imagined exists only for the very few. Your feet carry you forward almost involuntarily, drawn by the sheer momentum of the city around you. People do not stroll here, they rush, they jostle, they shout. A boy no older than 10 is already at work, sweeping dust into a pile with a straw broom, his eyes hollow. A woman with weary arms slams open her shutters and hurls the contents of a clay pot into the street below. You narrowly avoid discovering what it contained. No one laughs. No one apologizes. The truth presses down on you like the city's own stone arches. This empire, though vast and mighty, is not designed for comfort. It is not a civilization built for the many, but for the few who dine in courtyards far from the noise, who speak Latin like a spell, and whose sandals never touch the grime beneath your feet. You are not here to explore the grandeur of Rome. You are here to survive it. Rome does not welcome. Rome tolerates. And as the sun rises over a city, already groaning beneath the weight of its own ambition, you begin to understand a dreadful truth, one that no scroll or marble carving ever warned you of. You are not the hero of this story. You are just another body, one among millions, caught in the grinding, beautiful, maddening machinery of the Roman Empire. Welcome, then, to the belly of the beast. The dream is over. The empire awaits. The day begins, not with a gentle yawn or the luxury of silence, but with a series of sounds that crash together like poorly tuned instruments in an unwanted symphony. You wake before the sun is fully risen, stirred not by the warmth of light, but by the unmistakable creaking of timber above your head and the muffled argument of two neighbors debating, loudly, over whose turn it is to fetch water. Someone drops a clay pot 3 floors up. It shatters in the alley, and no one seems to care. You blink in the gloom, your breath visible in the morning chill. This is your home now, a Roman insula. The word might sound pleasant, even exotic, but it is not a villa, nor a cozy cottage nestled among olive trees. It is a multi-story tenement block, thrown together in a hurry to house the ever-growing swarm of humanity crawling across the empire's capital. It groans under its own weight. The walls are thin enough to hear the wheezing breath of the elderly man in the room next to yours, and thinner still when your upstairs neighbor begins pounding grain with a stone pestle, before your eyes have even adjusted to the dim light. You lie on a straw-filled mattress, if you are lucky enough to own one, or simply upon a woven mat over cracked tiles. Beneath you, the floor flexes. Above, dust falls from ceiling beams each time someone stirs. The wooden supports creak constantly, as though whispering the promise of future collapse. Fires are common, so are cave-ins. Survival is not just a matter of food or money, but of structural mercy. The smell greets you before your feet touch the ground. It is the same every morning. Damp walls that have never seen sunlight, mingled with cooking oil gone rancid and something else, sharp and sour, that you suspect is related to the communal toilet 3 doors down. You light a small oil lamp. The flame flickers nervously, casting long shadows across clay jugs, wooden bowls, and a cracked ceramic idol meant to bring luck. It has not succeeded so far. Your room is barely large enough to stand and turn in the same moment. If you share it with others, as most do, every breath must be negotiated. Space is not a luxury here. It is a battleground. You dress quickly, pulling on the same coarse tunic you wore yesterday. And the day before that, the cloth scratches. It never stopped scratching. From the open window, or rather, the opening where a shutter once hung, you hear the city stirring to life. A fish vendor begins shouting his prices in a tone that feels more like a threat than an invitation. Somewhere, a donkey screams. A child cries. A man curses the gods as he tries to rouse his half-frozen limbs. Rome does not ease anyone into the day. It shoves. The staircase down to the street is a narrow, winding passage, worn smooth by thousands of desperate feet. It smells worse than the room, much worse. Someone has vomited on the landing. Someone else has left a clay pot filled with urine near the wall. You step over both, your sandals already damp. Outside, a cold wind cuts through the alleys like a thief in the night, carrying with it soot from the bakeries and the promise of another exhausting, uneventful day. No one offers a smile. No one says good morning. This is not a city of optimism. This is a city of momentum, and it expects you to keep moving whether or not your spirit wants to follow. And so you emerge from the womb of the insula, blinking into a gray sky and wondering quietly, bitterly, how anyone could possibly call this place the height of civilization. But breakfast awaits, or at least something that pretends to be. You emerge from your crumbling insula, stomach hollow, mouth dry, and the chill of the morning still clinging to your skin. Your body longs for warmth, for nourishment, for something to remind it that you are alive and not merely surviving. But this is Rome, and Rome is not in the habit of granting such favors to those who live near its bottom. Breakfast is not a meal. It is a moment, a pause between suffering and toil. And for most of the empire's teeming core, it is an exercise in compromise between hunger and humiliation. You walk to the corner where a small, soot-blackened stall is already active. The vendor is an old man with missing teeth and a stare so blank it might be carved from marble. He gestures without speaking, because he does not need to. You already know what he is offering. Everyone does. The choices are few, and they are all equally forgettable. A small, hard disk of barley bread sits before you, its surface cracked like dry earth, its edges resembling pottery more than food. You pick it up. It has the weight of a stone and the texture of despair. This is not the bread of banquets. This is panis plebeius, the bread of the commoner, made from the cheapest grain, barely leavened, baked in shared ovens that have not been cleaned in years. It will take effort to chew. It will take more effort to swallow. Beside it, if fortune smiles, there may be a small bowl containing olive paste, thick, salty, and sour. It clings to the spoon like grease and tastes of bitterness and brine. The olives used are old, pressed for oil, then mashed and salted to preserve what little flavor remains. It is not a delicacy. It is a memory of what the wealthy call food. You sip from a cup of diluted wine, so watered down it feels more like an insult than a beverage. The wine is sour, not aged, spoiled. It stings the tongue, but it is safer than the water drawn from communal cisterns where rats and refuse float freely. You drink anyway. What choice do you have? Nearby, a child gnaws at a fig that is mostly skin and pit. A woman feeds her baby with gruel thinned so far it barely coats the wooden spoon. A man with cracked hands eats in silence, staring at the wall as if afraid the wall might stare back. No one speaks much during breakfast. There is nothing to say. The day has not yet offered anything to be grateful for. Perhaps you imagine that Romans dined on roasted dormice, honeyed dates, and flamingo tongues. And yes, such things existed in villas, in palaces, in the stomachs of men who would never walk these streets. But that is not your Rome. That is not your table. Your Rome is hungry. Even those with a few extra coins find little improvement. A small cake of lentils, maybe a bit of dried onion. Occasionally, a smear of cheese so sharp it makes your eyes water. Meat is a rumor, and eggs a rare treasure. Fruit is seasonal and often bruised. Vegetables are boiled until lifeless, and then boiled some more. What remains is soft, tasteless pulp. The empire boasts of its roads, its armies, its gods, but not its breakfasts. And perhaps that is the one honest thing about it. You finish your bread, jaws aching. You lick your fingers, more out of habit than hunger. And just like that, your meal is over. You do not feel full. You feel functional. That is enough. It has to be. The streets are beginning to crowd now. The day presses onward. You must follow. Your stomach will forget this meal before the hour turns. But your body has what it needs to endure, just barely. And in Rome, that is the definition of success. You wipe your hands on your tunic and keep walking. The city is alive. And so are you, for now. As you step back into the labyrinthine alleys of Rome, your senses are immediately overwhelmed. Not by color, nor by music, nor even by movement, but by smell. Rome does not greet you with perfume. It welcomes you with an assault of odors so rich and layered they seem to tell their own history, one of filth, fermentation, and forgotten dignity. You pass a doorway. A loud splash echoes behind you. You do not turn. You do not need to. Someone has emptied their chamber pot directly into the street, as they do every morning, without warning, without shame. The contents slosh into the open gutter that runs down the middle of the road, if it can be called a road. The gutter carries away a mixture of human waste, rainwater, blood, ash, and everything the city no longer wants, but cannot quite get rid of. Your sandals are already wet. You continue walking, nose wrinkled, but soon realize there is no point in resisting. The smell is not isolated. It is everywhere. It clings to walls, rises from cracks, seeps from doorways. And then you reach the tanneries. Here the air thickens. It grows heavy, pungent, and strangely sweet in the most offensive way possible. Animal hides hang from wooden racks, dripping with fluids you cannot name. Workers strip fur with knives dulled from overuse, dunk skins into vats filled with water, bark, and, if you are unfortunate enough to learn, human urine. It is a necessary ingredient, prized for its ammonia, and collected daily from public jars set out on street corners. Yes, people relieve themselves in designated pots, placed along the thoroughfares, not for sanitation, but for industry. The urine is purchased, poured, and stirred into the tanning process with bare hands. You watch as a man, elbow deep in this reeking stew, whistles a cheerful tune. He catches your eye, shrugs, and keeps working. Farther down, the butchers begin their day. The scent of raw meat mingles with blood and offal, left in buckets near the sidewalk to be collected or ignored. Flies swarm in clouds. A mangy dog snatches something red and vanishes behind a pillar. No one reacts. It is normal. Rome is never promised to be clean. You pass a latrina, a public toilet. It is a stone bench with holes carved into it, open to the air, shared by strangers, and situated beside a flowing water channel meant to carry waste away. That channel does not always succeed. Beneath the bench, something glistens. You do not look closely. To clean oneself, a communal sponge on a stick waits in a shallow basin of water. You stare at it. You understand what it is. You do not want to. The water has not been changed since yesterday, or the day before. You move on. At certain intersections, the smell lessens, but only slightly. Perhaps a bakery nearby masks it for a moment, the scent of singed flour and rising crust playing tricks on your mind. But the illusion vanishes quickly. Even the cleanest parts of Rome bear the undercurrent of rot, like a perfume applied over decay. And yet, the people move through it as if nothing is amiss. They laugh, argue, gossip. Children run barefoot through puddles you would not touch with a spear. The human nose, it seems, can adapt to almost anything. You cannot. You hold your breath, then release it. And in that moment, you understand something important. Rome is not just a place. It is a smell, ancient, alive, aggressive. It pours into your nostrils, clings to your clothes, settles deep into your memory. No bath will ever remove it entirely. And the day has barely begun. At first glance, the people of Rome might appear similar, sandaled feet on the same uneven stones, worn tunics flapping in the same smoky wind, faces weathered by the same indifferent sun. But linger just a moment longer, and you begin to see the fault lines carved not into stone, but into flesh. A nod too shallow, a gaze held too long, a back not bowed at the correct angle. And suddenly, the illusion of equality splinters. Power in Rome is not simply a privilege. It is a performance, enforced at every level and reinforced through ritual, dress, and when necessary, the lash. You, newly arrived, may think yourself merely poor, but Rome has a word for that, plebs, and it means far more than a lack of coin. It means invisibility when convenient and hypervisibility when dangerous. It means stepping aside in crowded streets, even if your path is righteous and theirs is drunken. It means silence when spoken to, an apology when struck. Worse still is the realization that beneath even the poorest freeborn Roman stands another group, those who are not considered people at all, slaves, the backbone of the empire. The hands that built the roads, cooked the meals, held the chamber pots, and often took the blame. They are not few. They are not rare. Rome, in its splendor, is filled with more unfree than free. And yet, this brutal arrangement is so normalized, so embedded into daily life, that it passes without remark. A boy stands motionless beside his master's litter, eyes fixed forward, fingers raw from holding the pole all morning. No one thanks him. No one speaks to him. His presence is as expected as the curb beneath your feet. Across the street, a girl balances a basket of folded togas on her head. She stumbles. The basket falls. Her master strikes her across the ear with a bronze ring, and the sound echoes like a bell. Again, no one reacts. The cruelty is not always loud. Sometimes it's bureaucratic. A slave cannot marry. A slave cannot testify in court unless tortured first, because their words are considered unreliable unless pain draws them out. A slave has no legal family, no property, no past. Their name is often not their own. Yet even among the enslaved, there is a hierarchy. Some labor in the fields of the mines, broken before 30, forgotten by 31. Others work in kitchens, in shops, in homes. A few, the most trusted, become body servants, tutors, scribes. They are allowed to speak more freely, to dress slightly better, to hope faintly for manumission. Freedom, granted not as a right, but as a favor, if the master so chooses. Some earn it. Many die waiting. But freedom, when granted, is never full. The freedman becomes a libertus, marked forever by the shadow of bondage. He owes loyalty to his former master, now his patron. His success, should it come, will always be tied to another man's permission. He may rise, yes, but never above the finger that once pointed and commanded him to kneel. And what of you? You may be free, technically, but you own nothing. You answer to many. You watch your words around those with thicker sandals and better rings. Status in Rome is not just wealth. It is vocabulary, posture, association. It is how many slaves you command, how many clients follow you, how often your name is spoken in the forum, and by whom. It becomes clear, disturbingly quickly, that freedom in Rome is not the absence of chains. It is simply the right to wear finer ones, to tighten them around others, to pretend they are ornaments. The more you see, the more you understand that Roman society is not built on equality distorted, but on inequality perfected. Every stair, every column, every title is part of a system that rewards cruelty and calls it order. And now, with every glance, every awkward pause, you must decide, how invisible can you make yourself, and for how long? Because in a world where looking the wrong patrician in the eye might earn you a broken jaw, knowing your place is not humility, it is survival. Not every renown dreamt of greatness, but most hoped at least to eat. That modest ambition, in the shadows of marble temples and rusted iron tools, was often too much to ask. Employment in Rome did not wear the polished smile of ambition or the glittering promise of upward mobility. It was a desperate grasp at the scraps left behind by the rich and the powerful. And for the overwhelming majority, those who lacked property, lineage, or patronage, work meant sweat, pain, and a quiet hope that the day would pass without injury or disgrace. You rise early because you must. By the time the sun begins to stretch its fingers across the city's tiled rooftops, crowds already form at the Forum Holitorium, the marketplace of labor. Men gather, tools in hand, eyes sharp, voices low. Each is hoping to be noticed by a contractor, a redemptor, or anyone in need of cheap muscle. There are no applications, no guarantees. You are not chosen for your skill, but for your posture, how strong you look, how desperate you appear, how silent you remain. If you're lucky, you might carry bricks to a construction site or haul amphorae from the river docks. If luck abandons you, and it often does, you wait all morning for nothing, hunger gnawing at your ribs while your competitors melt away, one by one, into the scaffolding and shadow. Some turn to vending, peddling chestnuts, cheap wool, or second-hand tunics, though even these humble trades demand bribes for the space, a whisper to the right official, a coin to the city's inspector to look the other way. Without protection, your goods can be seized, your stall destroyed, and your hopes reduced to splinters before the hour turns. Others drift into more precarious roles, messengers, errand boys, water haulers. They run across cobblestones slick with refuse, deliver messages they do not read, carry loads that twist their backs before the first wage is earned. These jobs pay little and vanish quickly. Today's bread is tomorrow's debt. And then there are those who work not because they wish to, but because they were born into it. Children apprenticed to craftsmen, their tiny hands fitted to tools not made for them. They learn not only the trade, but the quiet resignation that their lives will repeat those of their fathers, down to the same calloused fingers and aching joints. A potter's wheel spins endlessly. So does the cycle. Skilled trades exist, yes. Blacksmiths, cobblers, mosaic artists. But entry into such circles requires more than interest. It demands connection. A guild might accept you if your uncle belongs. A patron might sponsor you if you've pleased him. Otherwise, the doors remain closed. And even within these professions, the work is exhausting, the returns uncertain. One ruined piece can mean a lost week. Women work too, though seldom with recognition. They weave, clean, nurse, grind grain until their hands bleed, take in laundry, take in lodgers, and often take in nothing at all. The market does not favor them. The law does not protect them. The city does not thank them. Some turn to the oldest form of labor in human memory, one that promises coin for silence and survival at the price of shame. Rome does not speak of them, but it sees them. And it uses them. Always. Retirement is a fantasy. Rest is an indulgence. Even the fortunate, those with stable hands or clever fingers, know that an injury, a storm, a simple twist of fate can undo years of struggle. One missed payment, and you're evicted. One missed meal, and your strength fails. One bad week, and you join the swelling ranks of beggars huddled beneath archways, eyes vacant, bowls empty. This, then, is the Roman economy not gilded in gold leaf, but ground into the dust beneath sandals. An empire built on backs that bend early and never fully rise again. No pensions. No promotions. No dream but to wake up another day with work still left to do. And so, with your muscles tight and your future loitering somewhere just out of reach, you press on, because standing still is just another way to fall behind. Somewhere between exhaustion and ritual, your feet carry you to what Rome proudly calls its jewel of civilization, the public bathhouse. For a moment, as you approach the domed structure with its columns and chatter, you might imagine comfort awaits beyond the threshold. The facade promises relief, steam, and serenity. But Roman facades are well-practiced liars. You hand over a small coin to the attendant at the entrance, one of many who guard the gates of cleanliness with the zeal of priests, and step into the dim vestibule. The air changes. It grows thick, warm, and humid, carrying the scent of oil, sweat, and something metallic lurking just beneath the surface. You undress quickly, not from ease, but from pressure. Others are watching, as they always are in Rome. The floor is slick beneath your feet, the tiles ornate but worn, whispering stories of 1,000 bodies that passed before you. Voices echo off the vaulted ceilings, bouncing laughter and arguments through the chamber like invisible birds. You try not to look directly at anyone, and yet it's impossible not to see everything. Bodies of every shape and status fill the space. Merchants, soldiers, slaves, all stripped of clothing, but not of hierarchy. Even naked, Rome insists on reminding you of your place. You enter the tepidarium, the warm room, designed to lull the muscles into submission. The heat wraps around you like wet fabric. Nearby, a man scrapes his skin with a curved strigil, sending rivulets of sweat, oil, and dead skin to mingle on the floor with others. A slave pours water from a jar, careless of where it lands. It splashes your feet. You pretend not to notice. Offense in the bathhouse is a social wound, and Rome demands composure. Next, the caldorium, the hot room. The steam here is blinding, almost suffocating, rising from the marble basin in thick curls that carry more than moisture. Somewhere in the fog, 2 men debate politics. Another mutters prayers. A third tries to rinse lice from his hair using borrowed oil. You inhale cautiously, already regretting it. The water, when you find it, is suspiciously cloudy. You dip a toe, then a leg. The temperature burns at first, then dulls into something manageable. But you do not feel clean. Not truly. You are simply soaked. Around you, men slap backs, trade gossip, whisper accusations about missing rings and unpaid debts. A senator's son sneers at a potter's apprentice. A freedman quietly counts his earnings under his breath, pretending not to listen. The bathhouse is not a retreat. It is a theater. Those who believe Roman baths are places of luxury have never visited one before the crowds. They've never seen the grime gathering at the corners of the pools, never watched the attendants half-heartedly stir the sludge with wooden paddles, never listened to the coughing fit of a man spitting blood into the drain while no one stops him. These baths cleanse, yes, but they also expose, and they rarely disinfect. You exit the caldarium, light-headed and dripping, and wander toward the cold plunge. The frigidarium, a basin of shock designed to restore clarity. The water hits you like a slap, and for a moment you feel new, but only for a moment. Then the noise returns, the smell, the judgment. Someone has misplaced their sandals and begins shouting. Another tries to sell perfume from a broken jar. A third quietly steals a tunic not his own. You find your own clothes, damp now, and strangely heavier, and begin dressing. The oil on your skin catches the sunlight for a brief instant, reflecting something that might resemble purity. But it fades quickly. Dirt, in Rome, is not something washed away. It is something you learn to wear with grace. As you leave, you glance back. The facade still gleams. From a distance, it is beautiful. That is Rome's greatest skill, making ugliness look divine and calling discomfort culture. It begins not with a speech, but with a sound, a rising hum, disjointed and persistent. The overlapping cadence of dozens of voices, all trying to outshout each other in a space never designed for peace. You follow the swell of noise, pushed forward by a river of people moving in no particular direction, and all seemingly in a hurry to get nowhere. Then, through the press of tunics and the rustle of scrolls, the forum opens before you. It is not grand in the way you imagined, not a place of solemn dignity or measured debate, but instead a pulsing, frantic corridor of human ambition. Statues of men long dead stand like frozen judges around the perimeter, their expressions stern, their arms raised in gestures that once inspired nations and now serve as perches for pigeons. Below them, the living jostle for space. The scent of sweat, ink, dust, and disappointment fills the air. Orators stand on makeshift platforms, gesturing wildly, their words tumbling into the crowd like sparks flung from a dying fire. Some speak of taxes, others of war. One man promises reform, though no one can hear what kind. Another waves a bloodied tunic and screams of betrayal, though whether his or the empire's is unclear. No one listens for long. Attention is as short as tempers. Senators wrapped in spotless togas move in tight circles, speaking only to one another, their eyes darting like foxes at a chicken coop. They speak in riddles. They promise nothing. And yet their whispers shape laws, crush rivals, and alter the fate of entire provinces, all while appearing to do nothing at all. You watch one of them pause to accept a sealed note from a sweating courier, read it with practiced indifference, and pass it to another without breaking his stride. Deals are made this way, not in thunder, but in silence. Bystanders gather in clumps near temples and arches, murmuring over rumors passed from tongue to tongue like sacred relics. Who fell from favor? Who rose from the gutter? Who bribed who? Who was seen leaving whose villa long after curfew? The truth, if it exists, is buried beneath layers of guesswork and performance, and no one seems to care. Here, philosophy is not dead, but it is dying, slowly and theatrically. A pair of Stoics debate virtue while standing ankle-deep in filth, their sandals splashed by a passing cart. Their audience is small and growing smaller. Behind them, a group of men argue not about ethics, but bread, who has it, who took it, and why the price has risen again. One accuses the gods, another blames the Senate, the third simply shrugs. Even the architecture seems uncertain of itself. Columns lean slightly off-kilter, stones dislodged by time and negligence. The once pristine steps of the Curia are stained with wine, wax, and what might be blood. A dog sleeps beneath the statue of Romulus, entirely unimpressed by the glory above him. You try to make sense of it, to follow a thread of meaning through the noise, but every path leads to another interruption, another speech, another gesture that promises change and delivers only more shouting. The forum does not speak with one voice. It screams in 50, and none of them agree. What was once the heart of Rome's civic life has become a theater without script, a market of words where every opinion is for sale and every truth negotiable. You do not leave the forum with understanding. You leave with your ears ringing, your sandals dirtied, and the distinct sensation that power, in Rome, is less about law and more about volume. You step back into the quieter alleys and carry the noise with you. It clings like smoke. You feel it before you see it. A heaviness in the air, a strange hush that gathers like dust at the edge of anticipation. The streets twist and open, and there it is, the Colosseum. Not just a building, but an announcement, a monument to the magnitude of spectacle, carefully engineered to make men feel small and crowds feel powerful. It rises from the earth like a fossilized roar, its tiers stacked like a stone amphora, brimming with old blood and older applause. From a distance, it stirs a kind of awe, a kind bred from scale, not meaning. But as you draw closer, that awe begins to spoil. The arches gape like mouths. The shadows between them stretch long and quiet. The smell, faint but stubborn, carries hints of rust, sweat, and the kind of death that doesn't bother to be discreet. A line of spectators snakes through the plaza. They come early, though the show will last for hours. Some carry baskets with dried fruit, flatbread, and flasks of sour wine. Others wear wreaths on their heads, festive, eager, dressed not for mourning, but for celebration. This is not a funeral. It is entertainment. Inside, the walls absorb you. You are pressed between bodies, merchants, soldiers, housewives, slaves, united not by class, but by appetite. The seating reveals the hierarchy. Senators near the front, shaded and comfortable. The poor are pushed high into the upper tiers, where the sun burns the scalp and the arena looks more like a distant painting. Wherever you sit, though, the view is clear enough. Rome has made sure of that. Trumpets wail. Drums follow. Then silence. The gates below creak open, and the first figures step onto the sand. They walk slowly, eyes fixed forward, bodies trained to perform. Their armor is gleaming but heavy, their faces blank with practiced detachment. These are the gladiators, some free, some enslaved, all owned. Their names might be cheered, but their lives are not their own. They are here not to live, but to be remembered, if only for a few minutes more. The crowd begins to chant, a rhythm that grows with each heartbeat. Bets are shouted, curses exchanged. You feel yourself pulled into it, not by belief, but by volume. Then comes the violence. Quick, brutal, efficient. Swords clash, blood arcs through the air. A man drops to his knees and does not rise. The crowd reacts not with silence, but with thunder. A child nearby claps. Some bouts are well matched, close, tense, even noble in their own grotesque fashion. Others are executions dressed as sport. A condemned man, unarmed, faces a beast loosed from a hidden gate. The outcome is inevitable. The entertainment is not in who will win, but in how long it takes. The sand is never clean. No matter how many buckets are thrown, how many brooms are dragged across its surface, the arena remembers. It drinks blood without protest. It holds on to pain the way marble holds heat. You wonder how many men have died here. No one tells you. No one needs to. The silence between events says enough. Later, as the sun begins to dip behind the rim of the stone bowl, the crowd starts to thin. The laughter fades. The wine jugs empty. Spectators leave with full stomachs and satisfied expressions, speaking of technique, luck, bravery, and cowards. They discuss the games as one might discuss the weather briefly and without consequence. You sit a moment longer, unwilling to rise. The cheers still echo inside your skull, but the silence beneath them is louder. It hums through the bones of the Colosseum, a memory the Empire cannot bury. Then you stand, step over the litter of broken food and crushed hope, and walk out beneath the same arches that once framed men walking in, but not out. The smoke arrives before the prayer. It curls through the colonnades like a spirit unsure of where to rest, carrying with it the pungent sweetness of burnt offerings, frankincense, barley, and occasionally something less fragrant. The temple doors stand open, not to invite, but to impress. Massive bronze hinges, carved architraves, stern gods of stone gazing down at worshippers too small to matter. You step forward not because you believe, but because belief in Rome is not a choice. It is a requirement. Religion here does not dwell in quiet hearts or humble whispers. It lives in ceremony, in spectacle, in the thunder of goat hooves dragged unwillingly to the altar. You watch a priest, white-robed, perfumed, carefully shaved, raise his arms with theatrical flair. The crowd watches as though attending a play. And in many ways, they are. The words are ancient, older than most understand, recited not for meaning, but precision. A single syllable misplaced, and the ritual must begin again. The gods, it is said, are unforgiving of grammar. You scan the scene. Statues surround the sanctuary like judges in judgment. Jupiter with his thunderbolt, Mars with his spear, Minerva with her perpetual frown. Each deity has a domain, a personality, a temple, a staff, and most importantly, a treasury. The gods may be invisible, but their priests are not. They move with practiced serenity, their garments pristine, their hands soft from years of never laboring. They accept offerings with solemn nods and wine-heavy smiles. An ox is led to the altar, its eyes wide, its nostrils flaring. The knife is hidden until the last moment. The blood pours onto sacred stone, sizzling slightly as it hits the heated marble. The entrails are inspected, pulled apart like a puzzle of divine intention. The priest declares the omens favorable. The people nod. The gods have spoken through steam and offal. Or at least, the priest has spoken on their behalf. And what do the gods demand of you, the ordinary Roman? Coin, mostly. Time. Attendance. Public gestures of private loyalty. A bowl of grain at Ceres' feet. A copper coin for Mercury. A fattened pigeon if you really need Jupiter's attention. But prayer is not a conversation. It is a transaction, and one where the change rarely comes back. The rituals change with the calendar. One day is for Saturn, another for Vesta. The Vestals, pale and silent, tend their sacred flame, a fire that must never die, though no one can explain what happens if it does. Processions spill through the streets, clogging alleys with incense and brass. A priest in a lion mask declares the start of a festival. Another warns of eclipses. Another sells blessings. And through it all, the gods remain distant, always watching, never responding. Foreign cults flourish in alleyway shrines and secret chambers. Mithras, Isis, Cybele, each promising something more personal, more mystical, more strange. Some Romans scoff. Others sneak away at night, seeking answers in shadowed rituals involving fire, water, and whispered names. But even these paths are not safe. New faiths are tolerated until they threaten order. You find yourself kneeling before a statue, unsure of what to say. Your knees ache. Your stomach growls. You whisper a plea for health, or coin, or sleep without rats. The statue, grand and cold, offers no reply. You leave behind a handful of herbs and a chipped copper ring. Somewhere behind you, a priest sweeps them into a box already full of other hopes. As you exit the temple, sunlight blinds you for a moment. The smoke clings to your clothes. You wonder if the gods are deaf, or simply tired of being asked for so much by people who have so little. The priest smiles at another visitor. He smells of roasted lamb and wine. You see her first in stone. She stands in a courtyard garden, arms frozen in the posture of modesty, hair bound in a style it took hours to arrange and will never move again. Her face is smooth, perfected, untouched by age or worry. She has no voice. She has no name you recognize. But she is beautiful. That, above all, is clear. And like so many Roman women, she has been preserved more faithfully in marble than in memory. Step away from the statue, and she becomes harder to find. The real women of Rome move not through galleries, but kitchens, bedrooms, market stalls, and dark corridors where no artist follows. Their lives, dense with labor and constraint, pass with little trace. You will not read their words in scrolls or speeches. You will not hear their stories in the Senate. But they are everywhere, invisible only to those who choose not to see. In a wealthy household, a matron might wield quiet influence, though always through someone else. Her husband casts the votes. Her father arranges the dowry. Her sons carry the family name. She ensures the house runs smoothly. The slaves are managed, the gods appeased, the reputation preserved. She dines second, speaks last, and is taught from birth to make silence appear dignified. If she reads, it is in secret. If she writes, it is not preserved. The law calls her respectable. The poets call her virtuous. She calls herself fortunate because she is not beaten in the street. But beneath that thin layer of privilege lies a world even more tightly bound. The majority of Roman women are not draped in silk or framed in columns. They are vendors, midwives, weavers, wet nurses, prostitutes. They do not wait in atriums or tend to parlor gardens. They grind grain before sunrise, carry amphorae through alleys slick with filth, give birth without medicine, and bury children they cannot afford to name. They earn coin when allowed and are watched closely when they do. The law is not on their side. A woman in Rome cannot vote, cannot hold office, cannot plead her own case in court unless granted permission by a male guardian. Her body is subject to marriage contracts, her virtue to public scrutiny, her movement to the will of fathers, husbands, brothers, or sons. Her loyalty is demanded. Her freedom is negotiable. Even the rare women who carve out space in public life, Livia, Agrippina, Fulvia, do so at great cost. Their influence whispered about in corners, their ambitions condemned in verses that survive longer than they ever did. To be a woman of power in Rome is to walk a blade's edge. Too visible, and you are accused of corruption. Too quiet, and you are forgotten entirely. And still they endure. You see them in the margins of frescoes, tending goats, holding infants, pouring wine. You hear them in lullabies hummed behind tenement walls. You feel them in the rhythm of spinning looms, the slap of laundry against stone, the prayers whispered over dying children. Their work is never commemorated, yet everything in Rome depends on it. The city claims to be eternal, but it has always stood on their backs. The statue in the courtyard does not move. It does not blink. It will outlast you and all who pass by. But it says nothing about what it meant to be a woman in the empire. Only silence, polished smooth by centuries. That, too, was part of the design. At first, it seems as though the city has gone still. Shutters creak closed. Torches sputter, then vanish. Market stalls are drawn in like wounds stitched shut for the night. The clamor softens. The priests go silent. Even the dogs stop barking. For a moment, Rome seems to rest. But you are not fooled. The quiet is a costume. The darkness does not bring sleep. It brings movement of a different kind. One that thrives in alleys, beneath balconies, across rooftops, and through passageways too narrow for chariots, too tangled for patrols. When the sun surrenders, so does the illusion of control. You clutch your tunic a little tighter as you step into the street. No lamps line your path. Rome after sundown offers no organized light. A flicker here and there from a tavern window. A dull orange glow where oil burns low in a shrine. Your eyes must adjust quickly. Your ears must do the rest. Somewhere nearby, a man sings a slurred tune about Venus and wine. Another curses loudly, glass breaking mid-verse. A child cries once, then goes silent. You pass a doorway where two men stand too close together, their eyes not watching the street but you. They do not speak. You do not stop. The city's shape has changed. What was busy is now abandoned. What was crowded is now haunted. You feel it beneath your feet, the city flexing, exhaling. By day, Rome belongs to law. By night, it belongs to need. Fires are common, too common. A dropped lamp, an unattended brazier, an argument gone too far. The buildings, those tall, groaning insulae of timber and plaster, are ready to catch flame at the smallest provocation. And once it begins, there is no stopping it. The fire leaps from level to level, fed by linen, straw, and panic. Those who wake in time flee barefoot into the alleys. Those who don't are spoken of with short sentences and long silences the next day. The vigils patrol with buckets and clubs, more symbolic than effective. They are supposed to keep the peace, but they are few, and the city is massive. Bribes slow their arrival. Indifference stops it altogether. Sometimes they arrive only to watch the embers die, muttering about bad omens and worse landlords. Thieves work quickly. They do not need a storm or a riot. They need only a moment, a door not barred, a window left open, a drunk asleep. They take bread, coin, cloth, jewelry if it's there, but anything of use will do. They are not always strangers. Sometimes they were neighbors. Murder, though less common, is never rare. Blood doesn't cry out in the dark. It spills, and the shadows drink it. If someone screams, doors close. If someone begs, feet retreat. Rome teaches its citizens not to intervene. Compassion is dangerous after dusk. And yet, people move about. Couriers, prostitutes, gamblers, those with secrets, those with debts. Lovers meet in courtyards. Deals are struck in bathhouse ruins. Foreigners whisper in dialects no local can follow. Rome's heart does not sleep. It only turns its face from the sun and dares you to look closer. You arrive home, if you can call it that, bolting the door with a wooden bar that would not stop a determined child. You listen to footsteps pass below, then fade. You listen longer than you meant to. You lie awake not because you are afraid, but because it is wiser to be. Somewhere, a rooster crows too early. Somewhere else, someone laughs without mirth. And above you, the stars glimmer faintly, unmoved by anything beneath them. Rome by night is not a different city. It is the same one, only more honest. It doesn't begin with a trumpet. It begins with a list. Your name scrawled on wax tablet or shouted in a bathhouse. A neighbor winks at you strangely. A cousin avoids your eyes. You hear the rumors, but they arrive too late. Before you can hide, before you can barter, before you can run far enough to make it matter, you're standing in a line outside a barracks wall. One among dozens, maybe hundreds, all staring forward, all wondering if they've just been recruited or condemned. No one asks if you want to serve. Rome needs men. Rome always needs men. To guard the borders, to enforce the laws, to conquer towns you'll never see again. Glory is spoken of often, but rarely observed. Most soldiers don't see it. Most don't even see the enemy, just the terrain, the hunger, and the years sliding past like shadows. You are given a tunic, a belt, a pair of sandals, and a spear. You are told to listen, not to ask. Your training begins with shouting, then marching, then more shouting. They teach you how to hold the shield, how to stab, not slash, always stab, and how to stay alive in a formation that was designed to turn men into walls. You sleep on the ground beside strangers who cough through the night. You eat porridge flavored by ash and hope. If you complain, you dig. If you complain again, you are struck. The army breaks you first so that the enemy won't have to. Time becomes difficult to measure. You lose track of which province you're in, only that it's far from home and colder than it should be. You march along roads your own brothers built. You camp in forests too quiet for comfort. You hear wolves and wonder if they're real or metaphor. You hear rebels in the hills and know they are not. Fighting, when it happens, is rarely like the stories. Battles are confused, messy, terrifying. You shout not in triumph, but in panic. You stab not for Rome, but because the man in front of you will do the same if you don't. You see things you won't describe later, and you remember the smell. You always remember the smell. Then nothing. Weeks of boredom. Months of standing guard at gates where no one enters. Years of routine so crushing you begin to dream about being stabbed, not out of fear, but as a kind of relief. The officers pass by in polished armor, quoting Cicero. You pass the time sharpening blades that will rust anyway. Some find meaning in it. A few even rise in rank. But most remain exactly where they began, only older, with thicker scars and thinner patience. They think of home, but home no longer thinks of them. By the time your 25 years of service are complete, if you survive that long, your knees barely bend, and your land grant, if it arrives at all, is a patch of dust no one wants. And yet the cycle repeats. The young watch the veterans with awe. They hear stories of honor and brotherhood, of cities captured and enemies driven back. They don't hear about the lice or the frostbite or the letter from home that never arrived. They don't see the soldier waking in the middle of the night, reaching for a sword that isn't there. Because to speak too plainly is to break the illusion. And the illusion is what keeps the empire standing. You are not called a soldier. You are called a miles, a unit, a measurement of discipline, of distance, of disposability. You are not sent to fight for freedom, but for order, for tribute, for empire. And when your bones are finally laid in some foreign field, marked by a chipped inscription and a helmet no one will polish, Rome will thank you. Quietly, briefly, on paper. Then it will ask the next man to step forward. The sickness begins the way it always does, quietly. A shiver beneath the skin, a tightness in the throat, a dull ache that lingers a moment too long. You hope it will pass, as most do, because the alternative is far worse than discomfort. The alternative is seeking help. And in Rome, to ask for healing is to enter a theater of faith, fumbling guesses, and fluids. There is no hospital, not for you. That privilege belongs to the military or the very rich. Instead, you search the stalls near the forum, listening for the word medicus spoken with enough conviction to seem reliable. They are easy to find, almost too easy. One promises to cure fevers with boiled mint and whispered charms. Another sells salves made from crushed mouse bones and goat bile. A third waves eagle feathers over your chest while chanting in Greek. They all assure you that they've studied the works of Galen, of Hippocrates, of Asclepiades, men whose theories clash like gladiators in the arena of human anatomy. One says imbalance of humors. Another says divine punishment. A third says too much wind in the spleen. You nod, as if any of these made sense. You are offered remedies, each more unpleasant than the last. Cabbage boiled in vinegar and left to cool in an ox's skull. A compress of mold scraped from temple walls. Doses of honey laced with powdered emerald, expensive and entirely useless. Sometimes the cure is to be bled, always from the arm, sometimes from the ankle, occasionally from both. You sit still as a blade draws your blood into a bowl, the physician watching the color with the intensity of a seer reading omens. If the bleeding fails, they turn to the leech, a creature both feared and revered. It is placed on your skin with care. You are told it draws out the sickness. You are not told and may also draw infection. The leech grows fat. You grow pale. More serious illnesses invite more desperate measures. Women in labor are given poppy syrup, wine, or simply cloth to bite. Those with broken bones are bound in bark and twine, then told to pray. Wounds are cauterized with hot iron, and screams are muffled beneath wet towels. Fevers are treated by stripping the patient and placing them beside a fire, then beside a window, then back beside the fire until they either recover or are quiet forever. The dead are burned quickly, not out of custom, but out of fear. Disease spreads fast in Rome. The city is dense, its air thick, its water suspect. Plagues arrive often and leave slowly. Some blame the gods, others blame foreigners. Everyone fears the cough. You hear whispers of foreign healers, Egyptians who chant beside braziers, Persian wise men with herbs that smell of earth and thunder. But these cures cost silver, and your pouch is nearly empty. So you wait, and rest, and sweat, and hope that the next remedy is less awful than the last. You pin a charm to your tunic, a crude little figure meant to ward off evil, and close your eyes. And somewhere across the city, a physician walks away from another patient, shaking his head, muttering that perhaps the liver was wrong this time. Perhaps it was the kidneys. Perhaps Saturn is in the wrong place. Medicine in Rome is not science. It is theater. Sometimes it heals. Often it harms. Always it reminds you that the body is a mystery no one has solved, and that in the empire, even hope comes at a cost. It does not begin with a knock at the door. That would be too courteous. Instead, it begins with the sound of boots, 2, sometimes 4, scuffing the ground outside your dwelling, followed by the voice of a man who never forgets your name, even if you wish he would. He holds a tablet with figures scratched into wax, and a small pouch tied to his belt that grows heavier with each visit. He smiles, but his eyes remain dry. This is your tax collector, and he has arrived not to explain, but to collect. Rome prides itself on order, and nowhere is that order more elaborate or more punishing than in the way it separates you from your coin. There is the tributum for the state, the vectigal for the province, the portorium for moving goods, the anota for grain, the centesima rerum venalium for selling anything, the aurum coronarium for the emperor's image, and 100 more levies, tithes, tolls, and unofficial gifts that bleed into each other like spilled wine on parchment. And no, you do not understand them all. That is the point. You ask what exactly your latest payment is funding. Roads? Temples? The theater? The army? The collector shrugs, writes a new number, and informs you that your neighbor paid more, or less. It's unclear. Fairness is a philosophy, not a policy. Bribery, on the other hand, is quite clear. If you want a smaller number scratched into the wax tablet, a smaller coin must disappear into his palm. If you want your name skipped for a month, another coin. If you want a forged receipt, something to wave the next time someone with a badge asks, you'll need more than coins. You'll need friends. And friends, in Rome, are very rarely free. The corruption is not hidden. It is worn like a garment everyone agrees not to mention. The magistrate who demands tribute for street repairs lives on a road that has not seen a mason in 10 years. The official who oversees grain rationing owns 3 warehouses and swears there's a shortage. The guards who inspect merchant scales keep 2 of their own, one for the forum, another for favors. You are told that paying your share makes you a citizen, that it binds you to the empire, that your contributions uphold the glory of Rome. But the marble walls remain far from your neighborhood, and the glory, if it exists at all, does not descend into the insulae or trickle into your bowl. The empire takes, and when you ask what you've bought in return, it points to its own survival. Meanwhile, the wealthy, those who dine on silver plates and bathe in heated rooms, navigate the tax code like poets. They build temples to evade debt, fund games to dodge audits, and name every bribe a donation. They hire men to find loopholes. They hire more to dig new ones. Their names are whispered at dinner parties, engraved on civic monuments, and spoken with admiration for their cunning. You, on the other hand, count copper and pray it's enough. When you finally hand over your payment, the collector smiles again, this time with something closer to pity. He mutters a half-blessing, seals his tablet, and moves on to the next door. You watch him go, lighter by your burden, heavier by your labor. And as you sit back down to whatever task earns tomorrow's meal, you begin to understand the rhythm of the empire, not as conquest or culture, but as a toll that never ends. You do not live in Rome. You rent your place within it, one coin at a time, always behind, always owing. You are told, almost immediately upon arriving in Rome, that you stand within the heart of engineering genius, that the empire is a monument to infrastructure, the roads, the aqueducts, the sewers, the bridges, the domes that reach skyward not through faith, but calculation. You are reminded that Roman engineers moved mountains, tamed rivers, made the earth itself obey marble and mortar. The rhetoric is grand. The reality is damp. It begins with a crack, just a small one, running along the arch of a nearby aqueduct. No one speaks of it, but everyone steps around the puddle that forms beneath. Then another crack appears, farther down, followed by a wet stain on the ceiling of the bathhouse, and eventually the telltale sound of water trickling where it should not. The engineers are summoned. They nod. They frown. They quote Vitruvius, and then they leave. The leak remains. The roads, too, are legend. Via Appia, Via Flaminia, Via Aurelia, they stretch for miles, stone veins binding the empire together. But the closer you walk, the more you notice. The pavers shift beneath your feet. Gaps open wide enough to swallow a sandal. Dust collects in sunken places where carts lurch and curses fly. The roads still lead to Rome. Yes, but only if the wheels survive the journey. Rain transforms everything. The carefully planned streets become channels of filth. Water pours from rooftops, not through designed runoffs, but over edges worn by time and negligence. Gutters overflow. Stairwells flood. The insulae, already precarious in dry weather, now shudder under the weight of soaked timber and pooling rot. Buckets are placed strategically in rooms. Tarps tied with rope sag from balconies like defeated sails. What began as wonder now depends on how quickly you can find dry ground. And yet, when the sun returns, the praise resumes. The amphitheaters are still standing. The domes of temples still reach unbroken toward the sky. The aqueducts still carry water, some of it clean. Rome clings to its miracles like a dying man clings to reputation. The cracks are painted over. The statues are scrubbed. But nothing is truly repaired, only masked. Even the mighty Cloaca Maxima, the great sewer that drains the city's shame, groans with the weight of what it must hide. Maintenance, it turns out, is not as glamorous as invention. The original builders, those nameless craftsmen who set stone against stone with sweat and precision, are long gone. In their place remain managers, overseers, middlemen who boast of what they cannot fix. Funding is redirected. Materials are stolen. Repairs are delayed until disaster arrives. And even then, only the rich sections are mended. You walk past scaffolding that has stood longer than some buildings. You see a sign promising improvements before the next Saturnalia. The festival passes. The scaffolding remains. And yet the myth persists. Rome the eternal. Rome the master builder. Visitors gape at the arches, photograph the bridges, sketch the colonnades. They do not see the mildew. They do not smell the damp. They do not notice that when it rains, the marvels leak like anything else. Because in the end, Roman engineering was never just about solving problems. It was about declaring power. The aqueduct says, we command water. The road says, we reach everywhere. The dome says, we defy nature. But nature, as always, remains unimpressed. You duck beneath a dripping arch and continue on, stepping carefully across a puddle that reflects a monument so vast it nearly hides the rot beneath. You hear them before you see them, voices measured, deliberate, layered with the practiced patience of men who speak not to be understood, but to be admired. They sit on the steps of porticos, beneath shaded colonnades, scrolls unrolled just far enough to suggest wisdom without risking wear. Their tunics are spotless, their beards combed with care, their sandals far too clean to have touched the real dirt of the city. These are the philosophers of Rome, or at least the ones who made a career of appearing so. They speak of the soul as if it were marble, unchanging and perfect. They discuss fate, virtue, suffering, and desire in terms so abstract they become untethered from life. Stoics, Epicureans, Cynics, Platonists, each school its own little empire of thought, each syllable polished until it gleams. They debate whether pleasure is the highest good or merely a distraction. They argue over whether emotions are enemies or misunderstood allies. They use the word truth often, but never the word hunger. A few curious listeners linger nearby. Most pass without stopping. The words are too dense, too detached, too burdened with vocabulary, meant to inspire awe more than clarity. And even when they make sense, they don't apply. A cobbler does not need a discourse on inner tranquility while stitching shoes for a man who kicked him yesterday. A mother with 4 children and half a loaf of bread cannot meditate her way out of poverty. The universe, in its supposed harmony, has left the streets remarkably uneven. Still, the philosophers persist, and some are even revered. Seneca, who speaks of the nobility of poverty while owning enough villas to get lost in. Epictetus, once a slave, who teaches self-mastery to men who have never had to answer to anyone. Marcus Aurelius, emperor and sage, penning meditations between campaigns, reminding himself not to enjoy power too much while holding absolute power. They write beautifully. They speak convincingly. And they live very far from the tenements. For the elite, philosophy is armor, something to wear at dinners, to quote at banquets, to pass as a kind of moral currency. To suffer well becomes more noble than to avoid suffering entirely. Pain is recast as purification, misfortune as instruction. The world becomes not unjust, but educational. This perspective is easier to maintain from a heated atrium with a servant pouring wine. For everyone else, philosophy is something overheard, but not inherited. A baker listens for a moment before returning to his oven. A beggar nods as if in agreement, hoping the illusion of attention will earn a coin. A child stops to ask a question, only to be shushed. Philosophy, after all, is not for children. It is for those who already believe they know. You try to follow a conversation about the nature of virtue. You grasp the words, but not the world they describe. It sounds like a language written for statues, not people. It speaks of reason as if reason fills empty bowls or shelters you from rain. You wonder how a city so full of suffering has time for lectures on how to endure it gracefully. And yet, something about it lingers. Perhaps not the doctrines themselves, but the idea that thinking might be a kind of rebellion. That to question the order of things, even quietly, is its own form of resistance. Maybe wisdom is not the preserve of those who quote it, but of those who endure in silence, who live so hard they don't need reminding that fate is cruel. They already know. As the sun dips behind the columns and the philosophers wrap their cloaks tighter, the scrolls are rolled, the lessons paused, the audience, such as it was, disperses. You step back into the city's noise, none the wiser, but strangely steadier. Not because the world makes more sense, but because someone, somewhere, is still trying to explain it. It doesn't wait until you're ready. It doesn't announce itself with a sigh or a curtain drawn. In Rome, death arrives casually, sometimes even politely, like a man invited to dinner who takes the best seat and eats without asking. You learn quickly that the city is not afraid of death. It is intimate with it, familiar, almost bored. You see it often, under blankets in alleyways, on stretchers by the river, carried feet first through narrow streets accompanied by professional mourners who cry loud enough to impress the neighbors. Funerals here are theater. Hired actors wear masks of the deceased's ancestors, walk in slow procession, and declare the greatness of someone whose name most had never heard until now. The living clap. The dead remain untroubled. A wealthy man receives marble, an epitaph, a speech that quotes Virgil, sometimes Ovid, coins placed over the eyes, a tomb in a shaded grove. His death is a ceremony, a duty, a punctuation mark at the end of a long and curated sentence. For everyone else, death is swift, anonymous, and disturbingly efficient. Bodies of the poor are hauled to the Puticuli, deep pits outside the city, where they are tossed alongside others, layered in lime, forgotten by morning. No markers, no offerings, no memory. If the family has a few denarii, they might bribe someone for a basic cremation, a handful of ash swept into an urn, then buried in a wall or beneath a roadside stone. More often, there is no coin, no urn, just absence. Public executions draw crowds. Beheadings for treason, crucifixions for slaves, damnatio ad bestias for spectacle. The Colosseum is not the only place where life ends for the sake of entertainment. Sometimes the condemned are dragged through the forum first, blood mixing with dust, their names shouted, then quickly erased. The message is clear. Rome may not care how you live, but it reserves full control over how you die. Plague moves faster than gossip. A cough here, a fever there, and within days the alleys are quieter than usual. Whole families vanish, doors marked with symbols no one wants to read. The temples fill with desperate offerings, red, garlands, doves, all of which rot quietly as the gods remain unmoved. The priests perform their rites, but even they hesitate to touch the afflicted. Soldiers die far from home, their bones left on foreign soil, names recorded in dusty ledgers by men who never marched. Children die in infancy, their tiny graves dotting the fields outside the city, marked by simple stones or none at all. Women die in childbirth, their midwives whispering comfort through gritted teeth, hoping the next scream is not the last. Death does not discriminate. It only chooses its pace. But what unsettles most is not death's frequency. It is its indifference. Romans talk about the ars moriendi, the art of dying well. A noble death, a public death, a death that serves Rome or humbles the self. But the truth is, most deaths are neither noble nor useful. They are abrupt, dirty, unwitnessed. Still, Romans try to make sense of it. They hang protective amulets. They mark the calends and the nones. They whisper to Lares and Manes, the household spirits of the dead. They build altars in corners, light oil lamps, leave out bread and wine, hoping the departed do not return with resentment. Memory is fragile. So is fear. You walk past a funeral today, a small one. Just a boy, maybe 10, maybe younger. His mother carries the urn herself. No procession, no music, just silence, broken only by the rhythm of her feet on the stone. No one stops, no one speaks. By evening, someone else will pass here, and the moment will be erased. In Rome, death is not a tragedy. It is a statistic, a feature, a quiet understanding between the city and its people. You may live poorly, you may live briefly, but you will die, Ramon. And that, perhaps, is the only true equality the empire has ever offered. You open your eyes, and the light is wrong. Not the golden haze of memory or the soft gray of an ending, but the same dull, exhausted sun you left behind. The voices from the street are familiar. The grinding of the grain 2 floors above your head, the shout of the fishmonger, the stale warmth of a tunic that never truly dries. You'd hoped the nightmare had passed. But Rome doesn't let go so easily. Perhaps yesterday was a vision. Perhaps you dreamed the Forum, the bathhouse, the laughter in the Colosseum, as a man bled out beneath the emperor's gaze. But no, your body remembers. The ache in your knees is still there, the soot on your fingertips, the smell that clings to your nostrils, no matter how many times you rinse with vinegar. And so the question rises again, slower now, with a weight it didn't have before. How do you leave? At first, you imagine something simple. A road, a gate, a decision made at dawn to keep walking until the walls are behind you. You picture the Via Aurelia unfolding westward toward the coast. You picture a boat, perhaps stolen, perhaps begged for, slipping into the mist, its oars quiet against the water. But you are not the only one with this idea. And Rome watches its borders like a jealous god. The empire is not a city with walls. It is a system with roots. Even if you evade the magistrates, even if you bribe the right guard or hide in a cart beneath bales of damp hay, what awaits you beyond? Another province, another governor, another tax. Rome does not end at its edges. It extends into every harbor, every village, every language half learned in the marketplace. The legions are not the only force that holds the empire together. It is also habit. It is fear. It is the echo of Latin in places that have never seen the Tiber. You consider rebellion, if only in passing. But Rome has buried rebellions under layers of stone and fire. It wears uprisings like scars, proudly, but always on the vanquished. To resist is to be remembered only in defeat. So you turn inward, looking for softer exits. Can you vanish socially, not physically? Fade into the background. Reinvent yourself as someone not worth watching? You try it for a week. You stop speaking in the Forum. You avoid temples, bathhouses, the grain line. You answer to no name. You sleep in different places. But Rome is not fooled. It finds you in the price of bread, in the records of a census, in the offhand remark of a neighbor who remembers your face too well. You are known here, and to be known is to be owned. Some speak of freedom in whispers, of distant islands, of lands beyond the Danube, of forests where Rome's reach dissolves in snow and silence. But they are only rumors, half told over shared wine, forgotten as quickly as they are spoken. And even if they exist, how many make it there alive? How many return? You've never met one. And perhaps worst of all is the creeping suspicion that even if you did escape, if your body crossed the sea, if your name was forgotten, if your clothes grew strange and your language shifted, you would carry Rome with you still, in your gait, in your silence, in the way you flinch at the sound of sandals in a hallway. Empire, once swallowed, becomes part of the bloodstream. You wake again, another morning. The same scrape of metal on clay, the same smell of oil and despair. You try not to think. You try not to hope. You try to forget that you once wanted to leave. And that, maybe, is the final triumph of Rome. Not that it conquers, but that it convinces you there was never anywhere else to go. You wake again, but this time with no illusion. The marble has chipped, the torchlight has dimmed. The crowds have quieted, and the voices that once filled temples, bathhouses, and forums have fallen away into the soft silence of a city that exists now only in stone and memory. Rome, as we've been told, was greatness carved in permanence. Roads that reached the horizon, laws that outlived kings, and architecture so perfect it still draws breath centuries after its builders have turned to dust. But if you have walked with us through these streets, if you've stood ankle-deep in sewage while philosophers preached about virtue, or watched a condemned man bleed for applause while children munched chestnuts, then you know. Beneath the myth lies something far more human and far more uncomfortable. We romanticize Rome not because it was fair or just or livable, but because it was powerful. And power, when viewed from a safe distance, is easy to mistake for brilliance. Statues do not show suffering. Inscriptions do not record exhaustion. Ruins are quiet, and quiet things cannot contradict us. The grandeur survives, but so does the silence of the powerless, the sweat of the plebs, the forgotten prayers of women and slaves and soldiers whose lives held no marble likeness. The empire was built not on ideals, but on labor. Its beauty, like its violence, was systemic. Yet still we imagine ourselves as senators, as sculptors, as citizens sipping watered wine beneath an olive tree. We do not picture ourselves as the street vendor who lost a day's wage to bribes, or the mother who buried her child without a name. We do not want to. But perhaps we should, because only when we stop mistaking marble for morality can we truly understand what Rome was and what it wasn't. Not a golden age, but a machine. Not a beacon of justice, but a mirror held to the ambitions and failings of every empire that followed. And maybe, just maybe, the most Roman thing of all is the way we still believe the myth, even after we've seen what lies beneath it. If this journey through the underbelly of the Roman Empire stirred your thoughts, gave you pause, or made you see the past with new eyes, consider supporting this project. Subscribe to the channel to follow the stories that don't always make it into the textbooks. Like the video so that others may discover these hidden truths. Leave a comment. We read them all, and share your reflections, your questions, or the parts of ancient life you'd never considered. And if you know someone who still dreams of togas and triumphal arches, share this video with them. Let them see the empire as it really was. Because history isn't just what we remember. It's also what we choose to forget.